Well, one of the things that we talked about before we started is you sort of had like an interest in the whole like Mac gaming and Linux gaming thing as well. We talked about that before a bit before we started recording, but yeah, if there's anything you want to say like while we're actually going, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't have an incredibly deep knowledge about it, but ever since uh, Apple, I guess, started, and I'm sure there were some other companies doing system on a chip, so
Mhm.
basically the Apple Silicon movement that has started a shift, I think, in the industry. At the very least, I've been interested in how that's affected gaming on Mac and this whole kind of running Windows games um, on these systems.
Mhm.
It's been cool to track. So I'm pretty sure that Apple kind of released this tool or a tool set, which they were kind of initially aiming at game developers to say, I think it was a like a porting toolkit or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So see, evaluate how your game can run on a Mac by using these transpiling tools. Um, sorry, your Windows game can run on a Mac,
Mhm.
and the tools. I think they were maybe adapted from Wine or Crossover. I can't quite remember,
Yes.
but yeah, they allowed you to run your Windows game on the Mac, and a lot of the I guess the maybe homebrew community was just were getting their hands on these tools and porting games and seeing how they ran. And I think the fact that that community just kept growing, I suspect probably Apple noticed that, and it seems to me like they're starting to, instead of making an evaluation porting tool, change their strategy a little bit to
Mhm.
maybe just start to move it towards more of a product where they can people can just like what's it called? The Steam Deck uses,
Proton
I
on
think,
this.
Proton.
Yeah, Proton based on Wine.
Yeah, that maybe Apple will do a similar thing in the long term. I can imagine maybe their Apple TVs will run Windows games at some stage, or what have you, or iPads. Who knows? Maybe iPads will run Windows games as well. I mean, I think these chips are powerful enough, and if the transpiling process is good enough, then they can probably handle the task.
It's a bit more complicated than just like what Wine's doing on Linux or Proton as well, where it's just converting those Windows calls into Linux calls, because you also have the issue of you're converting the x86 calls into ARM calls, and you're converting the Windows calls into macOS calls. So there's more that goes into it, and it's theoretically supposed to be slower, but to my surprise, not as much as you would expect. And these tools are only getting better, and at least from the demos that I've seen of gaming on a Mac, like I wouldn't expect it to run as well as it does. But as you said, they are like really powerful chips, so I don't know. Like if you make something that's like optimized well enough, and then you can just kind of brute force it with how good these chips are. I don't know. You can get something that works at least well enough.
Yeah, it is quite surprising to me how well they seem to be coming out. So yeah, I'm just interested to watch the space and see what happens, to see how Apple positions themselves, I think, because and I'm kind of curious about Steam as well because well, it makes sense that Steam isn't really interested in the Mac. The user base is incredibly low
Mhm.
for Mac users, but I think it is a bit of a chicken and an egg problem.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't think Apple would necessarily want to um, kind of position themselves to be in league with Steam. I think they want to create their own ecosystem. They've got Apple Arcade,
Mhm.
so it's probably going to be more of the case of um, kind of dealing with game developers directly, and they've started to do it a little
Mhm.
bit more. I think they had Kojima up on stage at one stage. Uh, Kind of, I think they got him to port, was it Death Stranding? I can't remember, onto the Mac,
That sounds
and
right. Yeah.
So yeah, interesting space. I'm a bit of an Apple fanboy, so I'm curious to see what will happen.
Mhm.
I really don't think it will, you know, overtake in any way
Mhm.
the kind of PC gaming space, but I do think, the hardware landscape is changing. When Nintendo released the Switch, that was a huge change. I
Mhm.
think PC gamers didn't go anywhere, obviously, but there was this huge other kind of sector audience that popped up,
Mhm.
and I think that kind of style of system on a chip gaming devices, which are equally as good as these huge PC rigs, um, it can't be ignored for too long. And when we have generational shifts, kids being born just using iPads and tablets and what have you, they're not going to be building PCs as much, I think.